and welcome to another episode of the Atlantic So podcast. I'm your host, Donald Campbell, and we are here with one of my new friends, Andrea Nieves, and we're going to talk about such an important topic, civic engage and community engagement and advocacy. And, we're not here to endorse a particular candidate or tell anyone who to vote for, but I know a lot of people are looking to get involved in the community and a lot of people don't know where to start. I know that our center, along with the Mental Health Association in Atlantic County, we have a civic engagement grant through the Department of Disability Services where people can learn. It's all virtual. You can learn advocacy skills and learn how to get involved. So we really encourage you to do that. And in that spirit, that's why I have Andrea here, because she's a very involved advocate and community participant. So I want to talk to her about how she got involved and how you can get involved and how you can get engaged, because it's important no matter who is in office to always be engaged in the community, because they're making people in power are making decisions about you, and being engaged is very important. So hi, Andrea.
Hi.
So Andrea, I always like people's like origin stories, so let's start with that. How did you get involved in civic engagement and advocacy? When did
Well,
that start?
I would say it started probably about 3 years ago. Um, Mostly because how I grew up in South Philly, I grew up in a very integrated neighborhood, and I didn't really know a whole lot about politics or forms of government, or what does this do and what does that do, and how are laws made and policy. So I kind of wanted to get more involved with that. And it just so happened that the first thing that I kind of latched on to, and I was at a rally. It was after Roe v. Wade was overturned, and I was at a rally, and I just kind of met a lot of really good, like minded people. And in starting to kind of form friendships and everything like that, I met my friend Christine, who is a teacher, and she was going to school board meetings because they were starting to get some disruptions in school board meetings and conflicts. So I kind of started going to school board meetings with her in Ocean City, and it kind of took off from there. I said she attended them regularly in Ocean City and Upper Township in Cape May County. And I basically took what she did and took it countywide last year in my county, Cape May County, and started a school board watch. It got more citizens very directly engaged with their own school boards in their district, in the district that they were living in, which is important. People should know exactly what is going on with their school boards, what's happening in their school districts. And then we also started a small group of us going to the county commissioner meetings last year, because our there's a lack of transparency in a lot of things that are going on with government. And therefore I encourage more people to get involved with civics that way. Go to your meetings, your public meetings. It's very, there's always an agenda. They usually have to post it online. You usually can have access. Some places will have it videotaped, like some of the bigger school districts, they actually live stream theirs. Some cities will live stream their city council meetings, which I think is part of being transparent. And people should ask questions about why certain decisions are being made, and, getting involved more that way, getting involved more with maybe marginalized communities that are definitely going to need a lot of help. That's how laws change. That's how things become more well known.
I think that's a great point, Andrea. I really like what you said at the beginning was you weren't necessarily an engaged person before. So, because a lot of people say, well, I've never been involved, they don't know where to start. It's very intimidating. I'm sure you felt that, like, well, what do I know? But
Oh, yeah.
but so I think one of the things I took from what you said is just show up to you don't have to know everything. Just show
Hmm.
up and start talking to people and start learning. Because I think
Yep.
sometimes people think that they have to know everything before they start. And I don't think that's true.
Nope, it's not true at all. I mean, I really didn't know anything, and I learned in the last 3 years, I have learned so much, and I'm always forthcoming with any kind of information, and I still learn stuff every single day. If you're not learning, you're nobody knows everything.
Right.
But through networking with a lot of people and coming together as a community, we're each learning from each other. So that's why it's very important to just start going out there because you will, especially with public comments and stuff like that at meetings, or if you go to organizational meetings, you're going to automatically start learning all of this stuff that
Right.
is very important.
Right. And I think that people also think they have to, if they go to one of these events or meetings, that they have to talk, and you don't. You can just listen. You could just listen and be there. You don't have to say anything. And I think it's a good idea a lot of times, your first, second time, to just observe, see what's going on. You don't have to go in there and say, I'm going to advocate right away and I'm going to say this and say that. Because sometimes that's ineffective, I think. Sometimes it's better to learn how it works, make
Yeah.
relationships, and and then kind of have a more of a strategy. That's something we talk about in our workshops and our inclusive healthy communities initiative.
I I I completely agree. And with people that have joined my school board watch, I tell them, listen, a lot of times if there's an issue, a little small army of us will show up at the school board meetings. And I always tell people, you don't need to actually stand up and speak. We need people in the seats
Mhm.
that
Right, people that
yeah, that are clapping and cheering us on when we say stuff that really, really matters, to advocate.
Right, because decision makers see that. They see
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
They
they
see that.
do.
They see that. I mean, it's human, and it encourages more people to get involved. Because, you know, one of the myths about advocating, especially, we are a center for people with all disabilities, you can feel very alone. But there is a
Yeah.
community out there that will advocate for you and that you can be involved in. So really talk about sort of your experience, and you don't have to tell every little detail, but what's it like going to, I like your thing about school board meetings because everybody just thinks of civic engagement a lot of times as national politics, and that's
That
not true at all. A lot of this happens at the local level. Starting a book club is civic engagement, which you have done. But talk about, let's go to the school board. Talk about your first time, what that was like. Were you scared? Were you nervous? Were you like, what am I doing here? Here.
Yeah, I mean, that's the first one that I went to was in Ocean City, even though I live in Lower Township, so it's about like a half an hour distance. But that was where I met Christine and I met Katie Kelly, who is the leader of New Jersey Free Mom Hugs. And it was very, very crowded. There was a lot of energy and it was exciting and scary at the same time because of some of the issues that were coming up. And I gotta say, the first time I ever spoke at a meeting, I was very, very scared and very, very intimidated, but I do a lot of research. I think being a former paralegal has helped me with that because I know how to do a lot of research. And do I like to throw facts out, and a lot of times I have to quote law and everything like that. So that I find if I have a little cheat sheet and I just go on the facts, that definitely helps a lot. Being an advocate for somebody just means really a lot of times trying to enforce laws and policies that are actually already in place, but
Yes.
for some reason, people don't really enforce or pay attention to. So, we have Americans with Disability Act, we have
In New Jersey, we
laws
have
against
laws against discrimination.
discrimination. Yeah, and a lot of times stuff like that is not being enforced. And being an advocate, is basically saying, here's the law.
Mm. Right. Well, I think that's such a. I didn't know you had a background as a paralegal, which
Yes.
explains a lot to me. Paralegals are awesome. They don't get enough credit for being so awesome. So I went to law school, so I know these things, and people always will say, well, the law was passed or the policy was passed, and that doesn't mean it's being enforced.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean it's being executed. So it's important. And some of that is intentional. Some of it sometimes is ignorance. There are sometimes when people are
Yeah,
like, oh, I didn't even know that was a thing. So that's why it's important to know your state and local laws too. Like just
it
because
is.
there's no federal law protection, depending on what state you're in, there could be a state law or a local
There
ordinance
is.
that
Yeah,
protects them. So you really talk about kind of what you do for research and because a lot of the things too that we're going to be talking about in our initiative as we go forward is there's a lot of misinformation in there out there. There's a lot of so how do you distinguish from that? Social media it can be really hard to sift through. I've had people say, I don't know what to believe. I don't know what to, I don't know what
yeah.
to do.
Believe it or not, the correct information is very easy to find. All you have to do is look at your New Jersey. You can go just on your New Jersey county, state law stuff. It's very easy to look up. Our legislature to find bills that are trying to get passed, very easy to navigate. If you want to find other information, I always like to also try and do research because I want to try and get into policy eventually, where I like to find out what other countries, other states, stuff like that, what they're doing to combat some issues. And I like to compare what our laws and everything are doing in comparison and say, you know what? They're doing it just a little bit better. However, New Jersey does a lot of things a lot better than other places as well. We
Right.
are on the forefront of a lot of different things. Education is some of the best, in the United States. We have very strict gun laws.
We have very tough anti-discrimination laws
We
that
do.
are again, it's I'm not saying that bad experiences don't happen here. What Andrea is saying is that you have to look at things too in comparison to what else is going on and
Yes.
what else is
Yeah.
happening. So
We're not perfect, but we can always be better.
right. So what do you say to somebody? Because there's some people who will say, I would, a school board meeting, a town council meeting, that sounds like, going to the dentist, like the worst thing you could ever do to me. But I want to be engaged, but I want to be involved in my community. So what if there's something more, maybe less contentious? Because you're right. I mean, you're gonna go to a school board meeting, no matter what side of an issue you're on there's going to be contentious topics that come up. Not always. Sometimes it is just about the budget and who's doing.
Yeah.
But a lot of times it is. So, what do you say to somebody who's maybe not interested in that? Is there other things they could do? I know you talk about having a book club and stuff like that.
I do. I started it actually this month. It's a Facebook page group that is actually open to the public, and it's called the World Community Book Club. And I'm picking books that have to do with struggle with different issues that everybody as a human being in our world, not just the United States, is having to struggle with. A lot of it has to do with history. So, for example, I picked The Glass Castle for our first one, which had to do with somebody who was brought up in a very unconventional household that whose parents were alcoholics or just not mentally there. So they were very neglected as children. and turned out to be, really, really good and powerful citizens once they grew up. Next month we are doing, it's an Isabel Wilkerson book. I have to think of it.
Is that the cat? Is that book called Cast?
Not Cast, it's her other one, and it has more to do with, I have memory issues, so bear
Right,
with
no,
me.
we're not. This don't worry, it's not Jeopardy. People can look up Isabel Wilkerson, and also if you remember, we'll include links in the podcast episode. So please include all the information about your book group. Just send it to me, and we'll give people if they're interested in attending. And that's a form of civic engagement. That doesn't. That's
Yeah.
not necessarily going to a school board meeting. That's where you meet people. And
Yeah,
uh,
I wanted people to know that they're never alone in a struggle. And this person in this book, and I also think it's very, very important for us to learn real history, in the United States.
right.
So I in including some world history things that are going on in different parts of the world, and books that have to deal with that. I really think it's very important to for people to feel like they're not alone in the struggle, and things can be overcome.
It's a great point. What would you have, since we're a disability podcast, have you had any experience engagement with the disability community? I know it's a big community and 25% of the population. I got to do my plug. And people can join it at any time. In fact, if you live old enough, you're going to be lucky enough to join it. So, what have you had any experience with disability advocacy and engagement? What's that been like?
So my father was a paraplegic, and that happened when now I'm in my mid 50s, so we're talking about 45 years ago. He was working on the job, and he fell and became a paraplegic. And I was only 10 at the time, but it's amazing seeing just the advances. It was in the 80s when I know that they started having in Philadelphia, they started having to make sure like all the curbs were wheelchair accessible. We had to move from Philadelphia. This is how I wound up in Cape May County, because the house that we lived in was a typical row house and would not have been able to be made wheelchair accessible. So we wound up moving down here. We had to build a ramp onto our porch. Yeah, all everything seems so second nature to me now, but when it happens to somebody in your family, it's kind of a shock to the system
Right.
when you realize that, oh my goodness, it's such a struggle for people with disabilities to be able, especially if you're like in a wheelchair or, quadriplegics. My heart goes out to them. People, like Christopher Reeve. I just saw that one, I think it's on Hulu, that's streaming, where they talked about him.
Yes.
And, you know, that happened after my dad fell. And my dad was always saying, in your lifetime, they're going to find a way for people to walk. And they kind of have
Right.
already with a
No, and
specialized wheelchair.
that's important to remember. I think, and there is a ton of work to be done and a ton of things we need to do and barriers we need to remove. But I do, there has also been real progress in a lot of ways.
There has.
I always use myself as an example of somebody with cerebral palsy. There was a time when the idea of somebody with cerebral palsy or any disability going to law school would have been like, it's not happening. What are you doing? So,
Yeah.
you know, there definitely can be progress. It's important to learn the issues, be realistic, but not to get, overly caught up in despair as well, because there's always things you can do to improve your community. Getting a ramp installed, getting, helps. Getting more mental health resources somewhere helps. So, it's a bunch of little steps. And talk about that because I know there's a lot of talk when you're engaged in any type of civic engagement or advocacy about self-care. So
Oh,
how do you do you do self-care? Are you like I should be doing self-care right now? Actually,
you know, Oh, it's so funny that you say that.
Mm.
Yeah, burnout is a real thing when it comes to people, especially leaders of advocacy groups and leaders in activism. There is a serious struggle with burnout. And there are several of us who have come together and said, I can't do this anymore. and but it's so needed, and literally sometimes it just takes shutting off your phone, shutting off your TV for a day, and saying to maybe somebody that lives with you or your friend, and saying, listen, I really have to tune out and just do something fun for me. And if there's any kind of dire emergency going on, only like the world is blowing up or something, that's the only time you can interrupt me and let me know, "Hey, girl, you're in danger.
But and
Get out."
I think, Andrew, it's important to remember. I think what I always try to keep in mind is part of being civic engaged and being a good citizen is taking care of yourself too.
Yes,
It's
absolutely.
it's not taking a break from doing the work that you need to do. It's part of the work that you need to do. And
Yeah,
because you need to, it's like, I know people get sick of this because it's the same example, but it's a good example. There is a reason why they tell you to put the mask on yourself first in a plane before saving the others. There is a
absolutely,
reason because it doesn't make any sense. If you are not
absolutely.
taking care of yourself, you can't help anybody else. So I know I have to tell myself that I shouldn't feel guilty
No,
about
no.
putting my phone out
I
or
did at
disengaging.
first, but then when it got to a point where I was starting to say, "I can't do this any longer, I can't do this any longer because 'cause I'm so overwhelmed." And I literally did last year in the spring. I really didn't have a choice because I dislocated my knee and I kind of had to, like, really take care of myself for a couple of months, and I was able to calm down and find my strength again. And now I appreciate that I was kind of forced to do that, and I do it on my own now and without feeling guilty
Right,
at all. And
right,
laughter and music are fantastic ways, and community. You know who your community are, you know who your friends are that are your strength, and you have to be their strength. And go out and hang out and have a really good dinner and some laughs with your friends.
right.
Have some people over, that are like-minded in civic engagement, and you know have a pizza, share some laughs, some music, dance around the living room. It's fantastic what it can do for you.
Yes, I think that's a great point and a great place to close us close us because find the joy in civic engagement too. Find the joy, and it's not all on you. The world is not gonna fall into the ocean because you decided to watch, a TV show you enjoy instead of, being engaged for a while.
Yep.
It's not all on you, and just take a breath and don't put pressure on yourself, but I just encourage people to get involved in some way. Get involved in some way. It doesn't have to, it could go to the book club and meet people. And one of the things I always tell myself, and this is true anytime I've done any type of civic engagement, I always, because I have anxiety too, and that's the thing about people who do this work. They don't think we get nervous or stressed or, oh, you make it look so easy. No, I'm a wreck before I do this. But then when I do it, I'm so glad I did it. Like once I get there or get to the event and see it and be involved in it, it really feels good. And that's what I would tell people too. If you can, anxiety does burn itself out a lot of times, and you everything I've done civic engagement wise is something I freaked out about and then didn't regret doing. I was like, oh, I'm so glad I did that. I'm so glad I did that.
Yeah. And when you meet more people and you are doing more things in civic engagement, there are so many more little wars that have to be won, and they do get won. And there's a huge huge sense of not just relief, but empowerment in that, once you're able to get something done because you came together as a group and you were able to get either something passed or something resolved. It's amazing how empowering it feels, and it
Right.
gives you so much energy.
All right, and I will say, because I just have to say, and we'll end on this too. Little steps matter too, and I think that's something to realize. Like, if all you could do for civic engagement is go to Andrea's book club, that's awesome.
Yeah,
That's awesome. You don't have to change the whole world. It's about moving the goalpost a little closer to people being okay and having what they need, and that's okay too. I think sometimes we can get so wrapped into, like, I went to that school board meeting and they passed a resolution I hated. Well, you still went, and now they know every time we're gonna pass this resolution, Andrea and her friends are gonna be there. So we have to at least think about that, and we have to
yeah,
consider that. Like, that's a victory. That's a victory.
yeah.
That's a
We've
victory.
had we've had a lot of victories. We've had some not victories, but the good thing is the law is on our side. So
Right, right. And you just have to, I'll leave it with this. Decisions are made by people who show up. So showing
yes,
up counts in any form. So
yes,
so don't give up your power, and don't disempower yourself. So thank you, Andrea. You were
you're
awesome.
welcome.
You're my one of my new favorite people I met.
Aw, thank
And
you.
and you definitely increased my civic engagement. So I appreciate that. And thank you all for joining us. And see you next time on in an episode of Atlantic Soul Podcast. Bye everybody.